Ciao, 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 Palestine. And I'm going to go
So yesterday, yes, there was another large protest, and several people on this call were there as well, including Jonathan, who's actually in the waiting room, and I've just admitted. And 530 people were arrested, even though the Met Police had announced that arrests would stop after the courts declared the proscription of Palestine Action unlawful. Somehow or other, their collective mind changed, or was changed. You might have some thoughts about that. No doubt we'll come to your interpretation of that change and other matters, but I wondered if you might just start by giving us a feeling about who you are and the process or journey that you've been on, starting as a government lawyer with the Serious Organised Crime Agency and the National Crime Agency, and moving on to become a founder of Defend Our Juries and Plan B, Earth. Why you chose to focus on organisations which uphold the right to a fair trial for those defending humanity and life on Earth. So a bit of introduction to you, and then please say all the things that you would like to say about the restrictions on protest and what we can do as protesters and so on. So thank you. Welcome.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Tony, first of all, for inviting me to be here, and for all of you who are here, but also for yesterday. And it was so good to see the Jewish bloc there. It really was. And I will absolutely do what you've asked me to do, which is give a bit of a personal introduction. But if you don't mind, I'm going to start with yesterday, because I just feel that's where a lot of us are still.
Okay, very happy with that, Tim.
And then
Please
I'll come back to
well,
some of
people will be questioning you anyway, so it will all come out in the wash.
I think so. Yes. And it just struck me that, it almost seemed like a normal thing. 523 people being arrested for peacefully holding signs against genocide and against the silencing of people opposed to genocide. It almost felt like we're used to this. And so you have to remind yourself, or we have to remind ourselves, how extraordinary this is in so many ways. I think before this campaign, the Lift the Ban campaign came along, that sort of number of arrests in one day in London was, more or less unheard of in modern British history. I'm not going to say there haven't been examples, because I'm not a historian of that. I think probably there have been one or two examples, but you have to look hard to find them. I mean, mostly if you do a Google search or something, you'll be told the largest number was the Lift the Ban protests. And so yesterday may be one of the largest numbers of arrests in London in modern British history, and it's come to feel normal to us. And not just any arrests under the Terrorism Act. And I think there's so many, so much overabundance of words and language. I'd just like to come to one of the things that I hope we're doing collectively with these protests. We're trying to reveal something. We're trying to reveal something about the state of democracy in this country. We're trying to make it manifest, show it, so we don't just have to use lots of words and talk to people about different bits of legislation. So anyone watching can see what the state of protest rights is in this country. I just want to make a very brief detour to a piece of artwork that I've found a sort of inspiration. Some people may know it. Marina Abramovic, a Serbian performance artist. And in, I think it was early 1970s, she performed a piece of work in a New York gallery called Rhythm Zero. And the work was her and a notice attached to her that says, for the next 6 hours, I am an object. You can do whatever you like to me. And she put by her a table, and on that table there were various objects. There was a feather, there was perfume, there was roses, but there was a scalpel, there was a loaded gun. And to begin with, people interacted in, a relatively, compared to what was to come, playful way. But as time went on, it got dark. And some of the things that happened, I don't even want to describe, but people cut her with the scalpel. Somebody put the gun to her head. People had to intervene. People had to intervene to prevent a serious sexual assault. And at the end of that 6 hours, I mean, she was sort of battered and bleeding, and she got up and she walked towards the room, and the room was mainly men by this point in the room. And they ran away. And she walked towards them. They ran away like frightened children. And my interpretation of that work was, she was revealing something about, what happens when you peel beneath that veneer, that very progressive space in that New York gallery. And I think in some ways what we've been doing together collectively with the Lift the Ban protests is something not totally dissimilar, by putting our bodies just there in the line of violence, revealing something violent about the British state. And I think there's, that process of revelation maybe tells more than any words can tell. So I think that's important. Something else I'd like to say about yesterday, we described it as, in a letter we wrote to the Met, actually, as a crime scene on Friday. There will be a crime scene at Trafalgar Square at 1 o'clock. There will be hundreds of witnesses. And I think if we ask ourselves, in years to come, because there's no doubt it was a crime scene yesterday, but will it be understood as a crime scene because those 523 people with their cardboard signs peacefully holding a vigil against genocide and the weaponization of the criminal justice system to silence opposition, because they were the criminals charged under serious offences? Or will it be understood as a crime scene because what those police officers were doing was criminal, not just as, unlawful arrest, as unlawful violence that can't be justified by a law that doesn't even exist because it's unlawful, and we all know that. But a crime scene because fundamentally what those officers are being asked to do is cover up a genocide. This is part of, if you look at the legislation, the International Criminal Court Act, 2001, Section 52, aiding and abetting a genocide. Section 55 clarifies that section to say that includes action to cover up a genocide. And when what the police are doing, not just with Lift the Ban, but with other things too, with the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, with the cumulative approach to protest, it's silencing the people who are trying to shine a spotlight on government crimes. That is a crime under the law of England and Wales. Aiding and abetting genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity. So yesterday was a crime scene. Just before I come on to the sort of deeper background, and the personal introduction, just a couple of things that were interesting today in the media commentary, because it does get attention. I don't know if people have seen yet Tucker Carlson on BBC, not the sort of person we'd normally look to as an ally. But he's being asked by Victoria Derbyshire, do you think Keir Starmer has got it right in relation to, did he make the right call here? And Tucker Carlson says, well, I'm not sure Keir Starmer actually makes a call about anything. And he then says, and look at the state of this country, look at the state of Britain. It's illegal to criticize Israel. And Victoria Derbyshire goes, what do you mean? Well, he goes, well, didn't you see yesterday the arrests? She goes, well, yes, but it's a prescribed organization. And he goes, but why? Why is it a prescribed organization? Because, Israel wanted it to be. I'm not saying that's necessarily accurate, but just interesting that someone like Tucker Carlson could speak in that way. And then I just want to read out a short bit of the end of the Daily Telegraph coverage. Because again, Daily Telegraph, often been a mouthpiece for the anti-Semitism meme around protest against genocide. So it's interesting to see this. Let me just find it. The last part of the article, there's a subheading. I absolutely adore them. At one stage, protesters accused police of dragging a woman out of the protest and not supporting her shoulders. The woman could then be seen lying with her eyes closed as officers and bystanders surrounded her in a circle. Others shouted to the police that she needed medical attention. Yael Khan, who used to care for female political prisoners in Gaza before moving to England, told the Press Association, I wish when my family was exterminated in the Holocaust by Nazi Germany, I wish there were people protesting like all of these lovely people here. I absolutely adore them. Wow. See that? That's the conclusion of the Daily Telegraph article. Something is happening here. And so, although it is a crime scene, although it is in many ways a dark story, these arrests of peaceful people, there's something wonderful as well, because I think everyone who was there can sense that in many ways there's a very healthy situation in Britain right now, because we are not being intimidated. It isn't working. And that's an absolutely essential place to be. I'm going to come now to the bit you asked me to do, Tony, which is just give a little bit of my personal background.
Okay, thank you.
I started life as a human rights lawyer. I was in New Orleans in around 2000 working on death row appeals. And I did a master's then in international human rights law. It was around that time that the Human Rights Act comes into law in the UK. And I had an idea that seems now like slightly naive, maybe, but this was potentially a time of cultural change within the police, because everything the police do engages the Human Rights Act in one way or another. But it was an interesting time. It was an interesting experience being part of that, working for the Serious Organized Crime Agency, starting to understand the logistics of organized crime, and then coming to the conclusion that actually we see this on a much, essentially the same logic, but on a larger scale with the fossil fuel industry. The way they corrupt, the way their tentacles reach everywhere. And the same with the arms industry. So although it seems like quite a radical move to a lot of people, the shift into holding those industries to account, to me, it was just a natural progression. Let's go for the really serious organized crime. I was at the COP21 talks in Paris. It ended up in the Paris Agreement as a lawyer for the small island states. The obvious deficit of that Paris Agreement was the lack of, enforceability around it. And that led to setting up Plan B, which was an organization that aimed to hold the British government to account for its commitments under the Paris Agreement through the British courts. And that's how I ended up working alongside Extinction Rebellion. I think part of what I had in mind a little bit was that civil rights movement in the US, where legal cases were working because they were working alongside activists. And it was that relationship between the law and street protests that was impactful and powerful. I was there in April 2019. I guess other people were too. That felt like a sort of wonderful festival moment. But more to the point, after decades and decades of the scientists knowing what a grave situation we were in, finally it was made manifest through those protests. It was revealed not through words, not through language, but through the drama, the spectacle of those protests. And within weeks, the 1st of May 2019, the British Parliament declares that climate emergency. So the relationship between the two things is so, the cause and effect is hard to deny. The emergency had been understood by scientists for decades, but it's only made manifest through those protests. And then it's a few weeks later, I think it's June 2019, that the British government commits to the first legally binding net zero target. So it's working in a way that nothing else has worked. And that's precisely why Policy Exchange, a so-called think tank funded by the fossil fuel industry, published a report, Extremism Rebellion, in July 2019, that frames climate activists as the enemies of democracy. And you then start to see a very different kind of policing. And it's radically different, the police response. April 2019, when, there's images of police officers skateboarding on Waterloo Bridge. 2019, it becomes, vicious. People's fingers are broken. There are people held up at gunpoint in a van with T-shirts. The disability ramps, the portaloos are confiscated from the old Lambeth County Court to make the protest inaccessible. And that mood of April 2019 is not really replicated. The movement starts to, it just becomes much, much harder. And I want to move now because I'm probably running out of time, and I'm sorry, I haven't paced this very well.
No,
but
you're okay. Carry on for a bit.
We get to a point in early 2023, when the repression is so extreme, and we lose a young person, Xavi, takes his own life. It's a horrific thing, and I don't want to simplify or reduce the explanation for that, but part of the context for that is he's in between appearances in a London Crown Court. He's on a tag that prevents him associating with the people that he really depends on emotionally. He's had a really rough time in prison. And that's one of the things that motivates a number of people to defy the order of Judge Reed, not to mention the climate crisis and fuel poverty at their trial at Inner London Crown Court. And they're then jailed just for uttering those words in the course of their trial, where that's the reason they've taken the action they've taken. And Trudy Warner holds this sign outside in the London Crown Court about jury conscience because it's the only thing left. And then Judge Reed has her arrested. And that's the moment where a group of us say, look, we've got to find a way to push back against this. Because otherwise, there's just no future for protest at all. And I'm joined by Sue, among others. It was wonderful sitting outside in the London Crown Court with Sue. I think it was to the right of me and Angie Zelter to the left. Really, what a privilege that was. And we replicate Trudy's action with cardboard signs. And then by June, it's 40 people outside Isleworth Crown Court. By September, it's 250 people outside 50 Crown Courts. By December, it's 500 people outside every Crown Court in England and Wales. And then by April, the High Court has dismissed the legal action against Trudy. And that feels like the sort of thing that I believe could work, that good relationship, that healthy relationship between the legal process and what's happening outside the courts, where that people power is a counter to all those behind closed doors corridor conversations and the unseen influence of the arms and oil industries and also the Israeli government. And I think we see defend our juries, there's almost then a sort of reverse anti-shock doctrine. In other words, we know there's going to be more extreme repression coming down the line. We know if there isn't a quick response, it gets normalized. We don't know precisely what it will be, so we don't know what the next thing will be. And it's then the mass jailing of activists in the summer of 24. And that becomes the Free Political Prisoners campaign. And we have 1,000 people on the street outside the Royal Courts of Justice in January 25. And some of those sentences are reduced. And that trend of jailing is at least stemmed a little bit. And then we're ready when that prescription comes in with just hardly any notice. And it's so important that we respond quickly on the 5th of July of last year. And then we see the similar sort of pattern as the one we had with the Trudy solidarity actions. And I'm going to stop because I've more than had my time, but I just want to say a little bit about what I think the next phase needs to be for all of us. Because the Defend Our Juries has been quite sort of niche in a way. It's been about the repression of activists. That's only a small part of the story. When we look at the rising authoritarianism, the rising fascism, essentially, is what I think we're seeing in the Middle East right now in all kinds of ways. But it affects everyone, and it's a lot of very irrational forces coming together, and a lot of very anti-humanity forces coming together. And we need to be able to respond to that, whatever's coming down the line. And it feels like we're going to need a sort of deeper, broader alliance of non-violence so that we can call on, whether it's the unions, whether it's people at school, whatever it is that they're doing, we know this is what we're going to do next time the British government supports a genocide. This is what we're going to do if we see ICE-style raids on our neighbours. We're going to be ready. We will know how we will respond to that with principled non-violence. Because if we don't have that lined up in advance, it's really hard to organise in the moment. We know some of these things are coming. So that's maybe where I want to leave it. And yeah, thanks for the time.
Well, you'll leave it for a moment because I'm sure people have questions to ask you, and it's great having you here. But it's because I feel you're one of us. You're an activist, and there's no distance between the work you're doing and the work that many activists who are on this call are doing. So it's a great way of presenting. It feels like we're part of a community. So thank you for that. I can see Poppy's got her hand up, and other people will be thinking about the kinds of things they want to ask. I'll hold off from anything I want to ask for a while and let others. So, Poppy, would you like to ask your question or make your comment?
I've got two questions. One is more trivial and the other one is more serious. So the trivial is that John Lennon on the wall behind you, make love, not war. And the serious one is that I'm on a committee chaired by Mike Cushman. I don't see him on this meeting, so I'm taking the opportunity of asking this question. And the committee is one that's considering in what way can we, as Jews for Liberation, contribute to the fight against the restriction on freedom of speech. And have you got anything for us? There you go.
The first one is easy, but I'm really glad you've seen the likeness. But it's actually it's an artist friend of my partner who's done that, and it's nobody actually very real. But I can see the likeness.
Yeah.
The second question, I just think it's much harder. I don't believe in telling anybody what to do. I don't think it works. I think that can be quite violent in a way. And I definitely don't like the sort of guilt trip approach to, if you don't do this, you're complicit kind of thing. The one thing I feel is that none of us should be content with doing what feels comfortable, because it's not a comfortable situation we're in. But what that level of discomfort should be is so individual to people's different situations. And for different groups, for different movements, their considerations about relationships with others and things that it's so hard for someone on the outside to balance up. But what I would say is that with all that is happening right now and the perilous situation we're in, not just for free speech, but for the planet, we've got serious commentators wondering how far we are away from nuclear weapons being used in the Middle East right now. It is a time for all of us to push ourselves to do things that might not be easy to do, but we know are the right things to do. And I'm sorry that I can't be more concrete than that, but that's the thing that I use a little bit. It can't feel comfortable because that's not enough.
Naomi.
Yes, hi, Tim. Thank you so much for coming on our call. It's really tremendously valuable. My question relates to something coincidentally, actually, that you finished off your initial remarks with, which is about allies, alliances, who works with who to make the next step viable and doable. Because I feel you are so right. We have to be prepared for the next thing, and there are positives like the fact that we know some of the police who we interact with, reluctant to admit it, but are aware that what they're being asked to do is ludicrous and antithetical to what they think they're doing as police. I mean, some of us probably have a different analysis of what the police force exists for, but I'm sure many of them are very sincere. But when I was ill in Peckham police station cell yesterday, and people were bringing me cups of tea and checking on me, was I all right, and all that sort of thing. I just couldn't help thinking how different this is for many people around the world, and will be for us if we're not vigilant and if we don't build the alliances. I mean, I've worked in Nigeria and people are thrown in cells a dozen at a time, beaten, left without any facilities or food or anything. their rights ignored. I mean, what do you do if you're chucked in a cell and nobody knows where you are? I mean, this is the situation that we could so easily face, and it's horrendous. So, who our allies are and how far people are prepared to go outside their comfort zone, I was interested in what you said just then, is going to be absolutely critical, or we do face a terrifying future. It's not that, so there are points of light, but there is a very dark future ahead unless we can get our acts together. So, yeah, your reflections on that or anybody else's would be very welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you've said. That's the main thing. And of course, yeah, the relative privilege we do have in this country to be able to do the sorts of things we did yesterday and know actually, we're going to be okay, which a lot of people do not have. And I think that's one of the reasons we must use it. And I'm also sure, a lot of people are feeling as well, if we don't hold the line around the application of terrorism legislation to people who are obviously not terrorists, but are just annoying to those in power and what they're trying to do, well, then we move to a dark place extremely quickly. Because it won't just be Palestine Action. It will be anybody creating a headache for those in power and shining a spotlight on their crimes. So we've got to hold these lines. And the bit I was talking to earlier is a little bit, looking around and just using our antennae a little bit, seeing what's been happening in the States, imagining the kind of things that might be coming, but rather than waiting for the shock of them to come when people become sort of paralyzed, having those conversations with potential allies ahead of time. What are you going to do if that happens? What will you do in the unions if that happens? What will it take for you to go on strike? And if you know that we're going to do this and you're going to do that, is that going to make it easier? So that's really, for me, the conversation around allies, everybody knowing their role. And that, the psychology of courage, knowing that you're not going to be on your own, that other people are going to play their part too, so it's going to be worth it.
Yeah, thank you. Leah, would you like to ask something?
Thanks. So my question is about, and thank you so much for your thoughtful introduction. My question is about whether you're working with people in other countries. So we're connected to people in other countries, and certainly the situation particularly in Germany, but also in France, is even worse. And they're certainly looking to us in what we do. So I'm just interested in terms of your work. Just a couple of very quick points. A lot of people are very shocked at seeing elderly people. And I said some time ago, elderly people will need to be on the front line, and clearly we are, because it is less of a risk to us. My kid's not going to be taken into care, I'm not going to lose my job, etc., etc., etc. It happened to be my birthday yesterday. So
happy birthday, Leah.
It was very poignant to get arrested. And I didn't do the London one, I did it in East Sussex. So there was also an issue that police came from the local police station and also from Eastbourne, which is about 14 miles away, treated very differently in the arrest, not in the station, because experience very much as Naomi described. And I was sitting in my cell and just imagining how many Palestinians would have been thrashed into that sort of, 7.5 by 7.5 foot cell, and how they would be treated. And as you say, that's something why we have to take advantage of that. Anyway, so I'm interested in what you say about elderly people, consistency, and I guess thinking about the future and and any other things you may want to say about building those alliances, because the magnificent response in Minnesota was based on things that have been building for years. So we can't wait and assume that everyone will sit up then. few random comments and one question. I hope that's okay. Thanks, Tony. Thanks.
Yeah, and happy birthday as well, by the way. That's what a way to spend it.
I cannot think of a better way than standing up for what I believe in and being wonderful comrades. Yeah.
But the first thing about other countries, well, yes, of course, because what we're up against is not a domestic issue fundamentally. You know, if you see the problem as a sort of corporate fascism or the corporate state, the undermining of democracy, in particular but not only, but in particular by the oil and arms industries, and also big tech, of course, and all of that's comes together in the Middle East, and that is not confined to the UK. And this rise of authoritarianism and the undermining of democracy, we see it everywhere, in Europe, in the US, more widely. And remembering, of course, that for a long time, I mean, for all the flaws in this, I mean, Britain presented itself as a champion of human rights internationally. So that what happens in the UK is seen as a template by others for where the line is. But one of the things we've done is we've had a conference of lawyers and legal support people for different activist movements that was it Berlin in 24, and have maintained links with people since then. And they are reporting, you know, similar stories. I think there's some pretty grim things that have been happening in Germany, including around the use of organized crime provisions. And we are in touch with some of those people. On the whole, what people have said is, yes, it's getting worse where we are, but it's not quite as bad as the UK. And watching what's going on in the UK is giving us a sense of what's coming down the line. And that's also one of the reasons we've been working with the UN Special Rapporteur, Michel Forst, for environmental defenders. And he's put a lot of time into the UK. And his mandate, I mean, there's 47 countries under the Aarhus Convention. But I think the reason his office has spent so much time reporting on the situation in the UK is, as they see it, if they don't hold the line here, you know, it's going to get worse everywhere else much more quickly. The question around elderly people, I mean, it's not true, actually, that we actively go around, you know, putting adverts out there for elders. It's just not the way it works. I guess it was always a little bit true that the model of quietly holding signs that sort of hit a sweet spot somewhere, it was more accessible to certain demographics than hanging from gantries. So that's a little bit how our community is developed, but it's not exclusively that. But I think there is something, isn't there? In particular, people who, you know, who can remember the history and the way that history's flattened out for so many people at the moment, can see what's at stake, and maybe have, in some ways, you know, less of those pressures around the mortgage and, you know, do we lose, you know, all of those things. So I think that is right, and it's kind of wonderful too. And sorry, I think there might have been something else, but no, okay.
Was Leah? Was there something we missed, or no?
No, I was making some general comments. So thank you so much. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Diana, I think you were next because your hand disappeared down, and I'd like you to ask something now.
Really, what I wanted to ask is, it's defend our juries. And now we're looking into the abyss where we're going to have no juries for important trials. And I wanted to know a little bit your thoughts around that. And then there's something else I wanted to talk about. I'm very exercised by what's happening in workplaces. The silencing of voices in workplaces, particularly the voices that want to bring to attention the genocide. We've seen in hospitals, in schools, that they are actually beginning to very strongly discipline people who challenge the normative, and again using anti-Semitism as a battering ram. I'd like your thoughts on that, because it's not so easy when you are alone in a workplace. Yesterday, I was a witness yesterday, and I went with a friend who's actually a hospital chaplain, and she is a Muslim chaplain, and she is surrounded in a very Jewish area by Jewish chaplains and Christian chaplains. She works with them together in a team. And she feels very strongly, and it should be everyone who feels very strongly about what's going on in the Middle East. But there is a rabbi whose sons are fighting in Israel, and his views are paramount, both with the Christians and with the Jews, and she is isolated. That is the sort of thing that happens in workplaces, and it's something I think we need to consider and reflect seriously on. That's what I have to say.
Thank you, Diana. Do you have a comment?
Yes, there are two parts. I mean, defend our juries. I mean, it is the name. It is about jury trial. It's not only about jury trial, in that I think we've always seen a jury trial as in some ways as a symbol of what's going on, or the undermining of jury trial is almost a symbol of what is happening on the global stage. But it's an easier way to tell that story, as in a jury, an oasis of authentic democracy. 12 randomly selected people having to deliberate together, talk to each other on the basis of the evidence. And the attempt to undermine that by judges and the government and state actors and lobbyists, so that the jury don't get to hear the full story, so that they're turned into a sort of rubber stamping process, while you have the appearance of a jury trial. It's a little bit like the undermining of democracy generally. Preserve the appearance of it, but make sure real power is elsewhere. Don't trust ordinary people with real power. So I just wanted to say that. I think the question is absolutely an important one about what's happening to jury trial too. The threshold for jury trial that the government's provisions plans to change is to make it 3 years imprisonment is the test. And there've been a large, I think nearly 200 people jailed in the last few years for their principled activism, but only one of those following appeal has been over 3 years. That was Roger Hallam's 4-year sentence. Originally 5, but it came down to 4 years. So other than that, every single one would be just under that threshold. And when you look at the reports of some of the lobbyists, like Lord Wolney, lobbyist for the oil and arms industry and also for the Israeli government, he was one of the people who recommended something be done about the jury acquittals of climate activists and others. So it does look like this is absolutely part of the agenda to remove jury trial from the cases where jury trial is most urgent, because it involves citizens holding the state to account in the public interest. And who better to judge the merits of that than a jury of one's peers? And how hopeless that will be if it's left to the Judge Reeds of the world, who jail people just for mentioning the climate crisis. So yes, that is part of the context here. And if I'm honest, I mean, I think we should be fighting that. But I don't think we're going to lose those provisions completely. It's maybe looking for some sort of carve out where a case involves, an element of state or corporate wrongdoing as an issue in the trial. Surely there should be a jury there. And I'm so sorry. I've taken too long and I've forgotten the second question. I should write it down.
Diana, is there something that you want to come back on there?
Oh no, and Diana,
Yes.
yeah, I remembered it now. It was the workplace. It was
Yes.
the workplace, wasn't it? And that's a hugely important one as well. And I think it is the fear, isn't it? It's the fear of being accused of being anti-Semitic.
Mm.
When you know that the organizations who are pushing that are organizations like Lawyers for Israel, hugely influential and extremely well resourced, and they scare people. And I think this does come back a little bit to the role for Jewish Voices for Liberation. It is taking that on, and I feel this libel of anti-Semitism so strongly. It's so absurd, isn't it? But it carries such weight. For me, a huge part of the story is my grandmother getting out of Germany just in time. And I think for all of us, or probably many of us on this call, that never again, this is such a huge part of it. To have that turned around is anti-Semitic in itself. But I think that is a big part of this silencing and fear in the workplace. And maybe we need to get more organized in exposing that for the libel that it is.
Thank you. Ludi, are you okay?
Yes, Melon, thank you very much for coming, Tim, today. Well, I have got a very specific question about alliances with politicians. My background is that I've got 2 cases in Crown Court with juries where my only defence is very likely to be appealing to the jury's conscience. Both of those trials have been delayed until April and May next year, by which time the current legislation might be through and there won't be juries dealt with by magistrate, professional magistrate. So last week, last week I decided, I've had enough of this hanging around until they're sorted out. So I was one of the 7 who wore the cardboard signs but on tabards. I was opposed. Number 2, opposed. Let's see what they do with us. The question is around at some stage, whether it gets worse before it gets better, there needs to be politicians who draw a line and describe what that line is and stand with it. Whether they're politicians who are in power at the moment, or whether they're politicians that are provided by the movement as it grows and as the necessity is clear. So it sort of suggests we need, and maybe it already exists and I don't know about it, but a set of demands of which these politicians can sign up to that respond to this more general situation we have. So it might be around the proscription and change to terrorism, or it might be around cancelling particular laws and pardoning those who've been, or it might be wider than that. Do you know, are people giving thought to that, or is there something I can go to present, for example, to my MP and argue that case?
Yeah, I mean, we've it's felt like good news having a proper little group of the Green MPs, because there's now a team there, and they have been really supportive of us, including asking questions in Parliament around things like that crazy changing of the judges for the judicial review on prescription. And now there's a team of them. They were there to ask questions around that. At one point, one point it looked like John McDonnell was going to be really supportive of something, but I've had quite a few conversations with John around this, and I understand, his concerns too about, say, holding a sign which is there are a lot of people who would be pleased to see the back of John, as they've been pleased to see the back of other politicians of integrity, and he gives them half a chance, they'll take it. So that's the difficult balancing act he has to carry, and there's important work for him to do in Parliament. And it's one of the reasons, I'm not sure anyone else could say, John, your obligation is to do this or that. But there are networks. There's a network of MPs around jury trial led by Adnan Hussein, one of the independent MPs that we've been working with. But again, it's one of the areas where I think would be good to get a group of MPs and say, look, if this happens, do you promise now, that you will take a stand in advance? And I think that will, we can see some of the things that are coming. And then it's harder for them to go back on that. It doesn't make it impossible, but I think that's not a bad tactic for us.
Great. I think Vicky, who can't get her microphone on, has been trying to ask a question, and I think it's really, well, I'll read what she said, which is, do we have any insight into where this tough and brutal policy originates and is being driven despite the court judgment, which is the unlawful, I guess, the judgment that the prescription is unlawful? Are we dealing with a few individuals or a lobby or the advisors or civil servants? We all have our theories, but do we have any facts? Thanks for your question, Vicky.
So if I've understood it correctly, this is about the change of Met policy from the 13th of February to the 25th of March, when they said they would conduct arrests.
Yeah.
And don't really have hard evidence on that. It kind of defies rationality, because you'd think there's nothing in it for the police now. Not really, because they must see there's a prospect, that the prescription stays unlawful. Therefore, there's a real chance they're going to be sued for all these unlawful arrests. And nobody publicly was complaining when they said they were going to stop arresting. Even the Telegraph said this seems like a reasonable thing for them to do in the circumstances. And our lawyers have written to them and said, can you please explain this change of policy? It doesn't, it's not rational. And they've declined to give us a proper response. So it is unseen. It has the appearance of unseen influence, which is why it's so important we provide a counter to that. So I'm not going to offer any particular pet theories, because the short answer is there is no rational explanation, no transparent explanation.
I wonder, could I just read out the sentence from the bail conditions, which I imagine we all had? Can I read it? Which is, these regular protests have been designed, all those people arrested have received this, I think. These regular protests have been designed to commit terrorism offences, and any attendance will put the subject at risk of committing further offences. If they are not in the vicinity of Palestine Action demonstrations, then this will mitigate such a risk. And I looked in the eye of the police officers and I said, you're saying something to me which you know to be untrue. You're putting something in my bail conditions which is not true, because it's already been deemed, the prescription has already been deemed to be unlawful. And there's nothing they could say. They just looked at me. They said, well, we just carry out our job. I mean, it seemed so ludicrous yesterday to have some police person just speaking untruth to someone with no power.
Yeah, I'm sure it must seem utterly bizarre to the vast majority of them. Really, I'm sure.
Jonathan.
Hi, yes, I'm going to follow on from that last question, but in a minute, because there's something I want to say first, which was about the elderly, who are powerless, but nevertheless get reported. And I just think I was first arrested in 1963 against the Committee of 100, and one or two times since. And I've been rather surprised to be thrust into the front line at an advanced age. But what I would like to say is the BBC is reporting that the 523 people who were arrested ranged in age from 18 to 87. And since I'm 87, I might be he. So I wanted to take this opportunity to say, there should be lots more of us and older. And the way they're going on, it will be older because we're all getting older. Anyhow, that's really not what I wanted to say. I'm absolutely with what you're doing and what we're doing, but it is a moral appeal which we are making, in a sense. The attempt to make the police service unable to arrest us has failed. They have reorganized themselves. They're doing it more smoothly every time, and they're committing vast resources of human beings. That isn't working. The legal stuff may well work in the end. It may force them to back off a bit, but the fact that we're relying on a moral appeal is, I think, because we no longer have the power of the organized working class. We do not have any equivalent power to advance against the people who are determining this government's policies. For a time, I think we thought that maybe the new 0 hours working class might get organized and replace the classic trade unions, but that doesn't seem to be happening. And I think the whole of what we're doing, which is the best we can do, is actually a moral, but not in a real sense, a political sense. We're not organizing politically, and they are organizing politically. There was a question about why there was a change in policy, but you took it rather micro in terms of what happened in the last few months. But the policy has been common to the Conservatives and Labour, and our new Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood has taken it to another level, and she, of course, is a great ally of Morgan McSweeney. So we can see there's a whole collection of people using the Labour Party as they were using the Conservative Party to take things forward. I don't see how we're going to get out of this without organising politically ourselves. Sorry.
Oh, great. Thanks. Do you have a comment?
Well, I really just only to agree with that. I do agree with that. I think just the one caveat is there is maybe just a little bit more political pressure in what we're doing than just a moral appeal, because although they are just about hanging on there with the arrests through setting up these process facilities that actually look quite bizarre. If you're arresting people for terrorist offences and you go into this thing and you come back and sit down again, I mean, it's a bit absurd, isn't it? But the pressure on the court process, I mean, the CPS are really struggling to keep pace with the charging. And the pressure on the court systems and the magistrates starting to say, are we really having to deal with this? Really, Mr. Prosecutor? But really, I would just like to agree with you. I think it is vital we are organised politically, and with what is left of the union movement and others, and finding new ways to really put a spanner in the works of what is happening. We have to do that if we want to survive, morally as well as physically.
Carolyn.
Okay, maybe I'm going to say something. Hi, Tim. Thanks for coming. I'm very great friends with Angie, and I really refuse to give up my optimism. I'm nearly 70, so I guess I can be counted as one of the elderly. I'm still working, actually, because of our government policies, the reason I'm still working is because I didn't get my pension at 60. So I just want to say, though, that I just feel like being involved, and I was arrested 3 times over the last 2 weeks, and up with Angie at Lakenheath for locking on. And we got done actually for, they're about to, well, we're waiting to see if they'll charge us because we had T-shirts on that didn't say I support Palestine Action, but emphasised the words Palestine Action. And they brought the Met up from London because we were in Ipswich. They brought the Met up from London, 2 separate teams to interview Angie and I at 1 o'clock in the morning. I mean, the waste of bloody resources. But I just want to say that being involved and engaged in these actions, including the DAJ and other stuff, is actually what's given me back my, absolute commitment to maintain the optimism. And I think it's an antidote to depression and pessimism, is to get involved in and engaged in whatever way. I guess the perennial question is, how do you, as you say, people can do whatever they can do, can't they? There's no point in shaming people or saying you should be doing this or you should be doing that. It's like, do whatever you can do. But I guess, one of the things I did is that I think quite naively joined the Green Party, thinking that, so I just want you to know that I live in Keir Starmer's constituency and he doesn't tell anybody where his constituency office is. So a friend of mine did a Freedom of Information request. So if anybody else lives in Camden, his constituency office is in the Crowndale Centre. But so I joined the Greens. But oh my God, it's behind the scenes, it's just like everybody else. And there's this huge bloody furore going on about the motion that was put from a Palestinian about whether Zionism is racism. And so I think these traditional political parties, while I will go out and canvass for them and vote for them, are really not the way to organise. I don't know ultimately what you think.
Okay.
But, they're just as problematic behind the scenes.
Just a really short response to that. I do agree with you. I think there's a role they can play, but the only thing that the power of the fossil fuel and the arms industries can't buy, as I can see, is the mass mobilization. And that this is really one of the most powerful things.
Right, it's true. Sue, I can see you're ready to ask something or make a comment. So it'd be lovely to hear from you, Sue.
Thank you so much. Yes, I wanted to go back to ask Tim about the reason for the change of direction of the police in deciding to arrest us. And this may be complete paranoia on my part, so I want you to correct it if it is. But the only explanation I can come up with is that the government has advanced knowledge of the outcome of their appeal, which is quite likely now because only a week away, isn't it? And that they said to the highest reaches of the police organization that this is going to become illegal again, so we want you to arrest them. What do you think about this? And more importantly, what do you think the outcome of the government's appeal is going to be?
I feel I can offer you some reassurance on that, so I really do. Because although there are a lot of things wrong with our legal system, the Court of Appeal hasn't heard the case yet. They haven't heard it. They haven't heard the appeal. They haven't heard the arguments. And they will not know. They genuinely will not. There is no decision. There is no decision to communicate in advance. And they can't possibly have reached a decision in these circumstances where 3 of the most conservative judges in the High Court have ruled this unlawful. Can't have come to the opposite conclusion without hearing the legal arguments. So I'm really confident it isn't that.
Yes. Could I ask a supplementary question then? I mean, if they rule against us and they say now it is legal. Can Huda appeal to the Supreme Court? Because I believe this is being heard by the appeals part of the High Court. So, I mean, there is another stage, isn't there? Could Huda go to the Supreme Court?
Well, there are actually two more stages. There's the Supreme Court, which she could go to, absolutely, and would go to if she loses at the Court of Appeal. But then there is the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, because this engages human rights arguments. And that's where I'm really confident that ultimately we will win.
Right.
Because the Council of Europe has already come out and made a statement about this prescription. And the UN Human Rights Chief Volker Turk has said this is obviously unlawful. And this is my field. And the Strasbourg jurisprudence is really clear that political speech is a prized thing in a democracy, or should be. And the only circumstances you can restrict it in the context of a political protest is if that speech incites violence or hatred. And the case law on that is clear. And it is equally clear that our signs do the opposite of that. They call for an end to violence. So ultimately, I feel I feel not so confident about the Court of Appeal or the Supreme Court. And it's a long road to get to the European Court of Human Rights. But ultimately, we will win this.
That's very encouraging, isn't it, for people to try and understand, even if it's a long road. Thank you.
I noticed, Carmen, that you had your hand up at one point. Is that right? And that maybe you'd like to make a comment now because your hand disappeared. Well, actually, you've disappeared now from my screen. Carmen Vasquez?
Carmen is muted and I think can't unmute.
Oh,
I think she's trying to.
Can you do that, Daniel? Well,
I can ask her to unmute.
Okay. Well, I'll go to Glyn. I can see you've got your hand up again, Ludi, or is that a mistake?
Not a mistake. Be quick question.
Okay, I'll take Glyn first, and then we'll come to you. Okay.
Okay, then. Tim, thanks for a really interesting talk and quite engaging. Just quickly on the European Court, of course, we need to get there before reform get in, because then they will take us out of that jurisdiction. But two other points I wanted to make. I think there is still some possibility of gaining some ground in the workplace in terms of quite straightforward things like in the health service, because of the power of the Israeli lobby in management in the health service. In many hospitals, staff have been really seriously intimidated about what badges they can wear and so on. And I'd have thought if we were able to get someone fairly prominent, preferably Jewish, as a worker in one of those places, preferably a shop steward or even a convener, where the union and we've had a change of leadership in Unison at the moment, so you get some sympathetic response, although they've got to address all the issue of all the full-timers and the people on the executive in Unison who won't have changed at the same time as Andrea Egan came in. But you know, if we can produce a situation where a steward or convener is victimized for wearing a Palestinian badge or one of the watermelon badges or something, and they're Jewish as well. I think we could make a really good campaign around that, and it would go to the industrial tribunals, which are rather different. I'm sure you know better than I do the ins and outs of those. But it ought to be possible to win something there. No doubt it would then go to appeal somewhere else. But I think that would be something that you could make quite a lot of headway on and win in the early stages and get some publicity out of it. And that sort of leads me on to my second point, which is I can't remember who it was. He was saying, someone was saying we have to make this political. I mean, that not the whole argument, the whole situation political. And my question is, what if any? I mean, you're so engaged in everything, all the action at the moment. You might not have time for thinking about wider political campaigns, but how to move on in a way that connects with the general public, to ways of getting out of the echo chamber and the bubble that we're confined in by the bias of the mainstream media and their establishment authorities, if you like.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, well, first of all, really good point about reform and the European Court of Human Rights. There is always a fly in the ointment, isn't there? Yes, I should know better than to say this is guaranteed. Nothing is guaranteed, and that is an important point. And the workplace example, again, I think is really important. I'm just going to mention very briefly a conversation with the General Secretary for the Public and Commercial Services, the lead union for a lot of civil servants. And I was really surprised. She said she hadn't seen as much evidence as she thought there would be of concern around Palestine. And it was just an example of, actually at every level registering those concerns, but making sure the support from union leaders is there for exactly the sort of situation you're describing. And next steps, I mean, yeah, I guess one never knows what the moment is that gets things beyond the echo chamber, and how we connect and remind people that if we don't take a stand about this, well, it might be them next. But one of the things that is hard to predict at the moment is how soon people are going to feel at a completely different level the impact of what's happening in the Middle East. Because I'm not sure the full impacts are being felt yet. Some of them are, but not fully. And that may be a moment when consciousness rises. I mean, one of the next steps we talked about in the campaign, which I mean maybe doesn't succeed in this way, but maybe taps into people's feelings about Keir Starmer. It's just name it. Name it. Name it. Why don't you say it's a genocide? Because it's a hugely significant moment when people do name it legally. And that's why all the civil servants are telling the ministers, don't say it, because once you say it, all these obligations kick in. And so something that just focuses on getting a politician to speak it openly, honestly, at a point when members of the public are starting to feel the impact of these ideological wars in their pockets, maybe things come together. But this is, yeah.
I think I've got you now, Carmen. Maybe is your voice? Do I have your voice? No, I don't. I mean, one thing that's really on my mind it goes right back to where you started this talk, Tim, which was talking about what happened through the direct action of that period, 2018, 2019, and then of course COVID squashed things, but even and then into the movement, Just Stop Oil, Insulate Britain, Just Stop Oil. I mean, this was a big wave of direct action, which did have impact. And there's been a retreat from direct action. And I know you also talked about courage. I mean, I know in my heart that what I should be doing is being back on the street, blocking, stopping, but at the moment isn't there. You said we haven't felt the impact of the Middle East. The Middle East, the temperature in the Middle East is rising at a faster rate than, I think it's triple the rate globally. I mean, that is going to hit, and it's not very far in the future when it hits even more than it has now. And yet we've retreated from the direct action which brought us the declaration of the emergency. Anyway, I'm sort of sharing my pain in a way, so I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, I think that's right. But let's not forget yesterday and before, because although wasn't in the roads, in some ways, I mean, in terms of courage, this has been about getting us back into that mass collective action and all the power that brings with it. And we had the 1,000 people in the Strand in January. So I basically, really, I agree with you, but I think that's what we're trying to build again.
Yeah,
we're going to need it.
I'm agreeing with you. Really, we need it. Yeah. Ludi, I'll let you come back in briefly, I think.
Yeah, I can be really brief. Just two questions I can put briefly. One is, Palestine Action doesn't exist anymore. Is it a legal argument that you can't support an organisation that doesn't exist? Second question is, I think before I wasn't asking about the Green MPs or the good ones who are thinking about it. What is our demand of our local MP or prospective candidates? What are we asking them to commit to? Thank you.
Shall I take, and let's take a couple of questions and then we'll link them together. Richard, Jenny. Richard now.
Unmute.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I wasn't going to say anything, but Tim's last point about naming the genocide just seems to me absolutely crucial. I went earlier this afternoon to a talk on genocide, which Naamod had organized with Martin Shaw, a world expert on genocide. He has not been invited a single time in the last 13 months to write in The Guardian, to appear on the BBC in any capacity, apart from Radio Ulster, apparently. And it does seem to me this is the campaign, because you're right. If the government recognize it as a genocide, they are obliged under international law to intervene to stop it. Starmer has found other genocides in the past. He never found it difficult. But now on this one, and I think, also it is forces like Labour Friends of Israel, UK Lawyers for Israel, and Labour Friends for Israel, who are absolutely poisonous and menacing. We're intimidated by Labour Friends for Israel, for God's sake. The fact that other people who aren't involved in the struggle, are intimidated and won't allow meetings or cancel things isn't surprising at all. So I think these are issues we also have to kind of try to bring to the forefront of any campaign. It's not just the prescription of Palestine Action. It's the ability to name it.
Okay.
Thank you.
And
Sorry.
Jenny.
Thank you. I think I'm coming on from what Richard was saying. What I wanted to ask was,
We've lost your picture somehow.
Oh, sorry. So I put myself on. Hold on. Sorry, I'll put my picture on, but I don't waste everybody's time. Oh, here we are. Yes. What I wanted to ask was this, right? It seems to me that we are living at a time when the popularity of Israel is absolutely plunging, and it's only really, as Richard says, our governments, not ours and European governments, that are holding back from the conclusion that Israel is a war criminal almost beyond any of our memories, except, as you say, back in Second World War times. And I wanted to ask you, therefore, isn't this decision by the Met to change their mind on arresting people to do with some sort of government decision, that this actually might help them in the popular view of Israel-Palestine, that on the whole, we're very popular with middle classes, aren't we, at the moment? And it's really gone down terribly well, the action on Palestine Action, by people I know of all political parties, all backgrounds, but it's probably not a popular issue. So if it's possible that this is government pressure to try to, what is the legal position between their relationship with the Met? What can the Home Secretary make the Met do, which maybe the Met bosses don't necessarily want to do? I mean, on this issue, they may have actually preferred to take the action decided after the High Court decision.
Okay, and I see your hand is up again, Sue.
Yeah.
Does it relate to any of these issues?
Well, it goes back to Tim's earlier comments, and no, it doesn't relate to this. It relates to research findings that have been quite influential in the circles I move in, to stop people getting involved in activism. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but of course, and I can't quote this to you, I've only heard the results of it, but a couple of research papers have shown that activism, I mean, civil resistance, in other words, is not influential. And this goes against earlier research, of course. But of course, once this gets circulating, this is quite a downer on people who take these things seriously. And I think might be one of the reasons why civil resistance is reducing at the moment. And we need to undermine that, I think, because, as you rightly say, I mean, it's been very influential in the past. So
yep.
I don't know if you've got any comment on that.
Okay, well, we're sort of coming towards the end, because although it would be lovely to continue for a long time, it would be, we can sort of dribble on for a sort of 3, 4, 5 minutes after the end, but I think then we have to stop. It'd be lovely to get your response. Do you think you can respond to these points in the next few minutes?
I will try and do a quick snapshot. So Ludi, Palestine Action doesn't exist as a legal defense. I think it definitely helps with the bit of the defense that says, look at this in context. Palestine Action doesn't really exist. The campaign comes into effect on the 5th of July. What is this really? It's about the improper use of terrorism laws, and the campaign has been vindicated by the High Court. That's what this is really about, and stopping the genocide. So I absolutely think it's relevant to the defence. Richard, with the name it. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm really just agreeing with what you said there, but I think it can also be framed as about politicians being honest and being straight and saying things as they are. And Jenny, the government decision, I think this keeps coming up. I'm going to say just a tiny bit about this. I don't really believe this is a good look for the government either. I think the vast majority of people think, why are we wasting our money on this? I don't think it's a good look for anyone. I don't think anybody really understands it. There's a tiny minority of people who support this. So I'm not sure it's government pressure. We heard a rumour Keir Starmer really wanted this to go away and was thinking about not appealing to the Court of Appeal. We wrote to the Met after they arrested a woman on Al-Quds Day on the 15th of March and said this was a violation of your policy. What were you doing violating your policy? And it was just a few days after that correspondence, they announced this new policy. And it's almost as if, that was a factor to retrofit the policy to the thing they'd done on the 15th of March. I mean, it's almost hard to believe, but that's one possible explanation. I don't really think it's government pressure because it just doesn't make sense. And Sue, the research, I'm not sure exactly what. I know there's been research from Erica Chenoweth that looked at things a bit differently recently, but you might be referring to other things. I don't think we can say that civil resistance always works. I think it matters deeply how it's perceived to people. And personally, I'm not sure how well it lands if one says that the purpose of our action is to go to jail. That's why we're doing it. I think that can be confusing, correlation and causation. I think what matters is that the civil resistance is driven by a deep moral sense that something is badly wrong. And if people see that and sense that, as I think they have done with this phase of action, that's when it's powerful. When people see that people are acting from principle. I think there's a danger of, thinking it's a fix-all for everything and we're just going to keep on going with the same tactics that have stopped being effective. But, used smartly and finding those sweet spots, no doubt it will continue to be effective, and we need to show that.
Well,
and the other thing, Sue, is I know that I am winning when I have you sitting next to me. I have to say, it was true in May 23 with Trudy, and it was true on the 5th of July when you were next to me in Parliament Square. I just knew this was going to be good. It really felt that.
Well, it seems now, I'm really sad that this is coming to a close because it's been an hour and a half of really solid engagement, people thinking very carefully about the issues that you have helped us to talk about with such clarity. I hope that there'll be another opportunity in the future. There's a lot more to be said, a lot more to be thought about. And a group of people like this, spending an hour and a half thinking together is a really wonderful occasion for which I am deeply grateful, Tim, for your leading us through this conversation today. And thank you so much for coming.
Oh, well, I'm so grateful to you, Tony, and to everyone, because I've really enjoyed it as well. That's the other thing. I've just been, like you said at one point, it's activists talking to each other, and it's been lovely to be with you. It really has. I've really enjoyed it.
So thanks so much, and hopefully we will meet again, of course, and probably in the not too distant future. Things being as they are. So
exactly. Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone. Cheers. Good night.
Thanks everyone for coming.